Will cops form Marauder gangs after SHTF so that they can forcibly take food and other supplies from you and other innocent people? Today you will learn the answer to that question from an insider, and the answer may surprise you right after the channel intro.
Shots fired! Shots fired! Shots fired! Ambulance en route.
Welcome to this channel. This channel is all about learning how to prepare for when the dark times come and the grocery stores are stripped bare. So subscribe to this channel to learn more about prepping for those coming dark days while still retaining our integrity and our honor. So a common concern that I hear in the prepping community is that there is a fear that after SHTF that cops will actually form gangs or marauder gangs so that they can start raiding houses in order to seize people's food and prepping supplies. So today I'm going to give some answers and my thoughts on that subject, again an insider's answers, so that you can be better prepared for this. Now some of you may be thinking, hey, ethical preparedness is a cop, so therefore he's automatically going to try to paint the cops as all being good guys and that you have nothing to worry about. But you will see as you continue watching this video that that's not going to be the case here. Now, when I very first got into law enforcement, if somebody would have asked me that question, would cops form gangs after SHTF, I would have said absolutely not. But I have seen a disturbing trend in the hiring practices of law enforcement over the past several years that makes it so I can no longer give that definitive no answer to that question. But first let me say this, I don't think that the amount of police forming gangs after SHTF will happen to the extent that a lot of preppers think. But I think this also could happen frequently too, depending on where you live at, especially in the larger, more liberal cities. What I have been noticing over the past several years is that, and this is mainly in the larger, more liberal cities, but some of these cities have been lowering their hiring standards in order so that they can have a more diversified police department. Now don't get me wrong, I have absolutely nothing against a diversified police department. In fact, I believe that if an area is 80% of a certain race, then its police department that serves that area needs to be 80% of that same race also. Let's face reality, different races generally have their own cultures. And it really helps to have police officers that have intimate knowledge of that culture to interact with that community. So while I do completely support having a diversified police department so it mirrors the community that it serves, I do not support the lowering of hiring standards just so they can have a more diversified police department. Police departments that lower their hiring standards just end up with police officers that don't have as high of a moral compass and also don't always have the best decision-making skills. Now, as a longtime police officer, I have gotten to know hundreds, if not thousands, of cops throughout my career. And what I found is that the majority of these cops are pretty stand-up guys that would never steal, that don't want to use excessive force, don't want to ever shoot somebody in their career. They generally care about their community and they just love catching the bad guys that commit crimes against good people. But I have also seen some horror stories, usually out of the larger cities, of what some of these evil things that some of these cops have done. And this makes me angry because as a fellow police officer, their actions reflect on me and all other police officers. Now, I live in a pretty conservative state, but just like every other state, we have a couple of larger cities that have a tendency to lean towards the liberal side. And I'm really not trying to make this video political. I really am not. What I'm doing is I am just simply stating fact. Anyways, I have known of some pretty good guys that have applied to these larger, more liberal police departments, and these were really good stand-up guys that had perfect criminal backgrounds, just really good stand-up guys. But I have seen where they have actually been passed over and not hired so that that department could hire somebody to make their department more diversified. And I've actually seen it where these people that they did hire to make their department more diversified actually had criminal backgrounds, etc. Now granted, the prior arrest records of these more diversified police officers that they hired, granted these arrests weren't like drug dealing or really huge arrests like that, but still, when I very first got into law enforcement, a previous arrest of any kind got you automatically disqualified. Like I said earlier, I am all for a diversified police department, but I don't support the lowering of hiring standards. Do anything else to get a more diversified police department, but don't lower the hiring standards. When I very first started applying to become a police officer, I had to pass a background check. I had to have a psych evaluation with a psychologist or a psychiatrist or whatever. They did a credit check on me. They spoke to my neighbors. They even did a surprise visit to my house so that they could see how I actually really lived, and didn't give me a chance to clean up the house or anything like that before they visited me. Just simply put, they did a complete, thorough background check on me, and I had to have a spotless record. Anyways, by doing all of that, police departments ensured that they had upright and responsible people serving on their police department. And I just don't see larger, more liberal cities doing that anymore. So in these larger cities where they have lowered the hiring standards, I could definitely see some of the cops actually forming gangs after SHTF. I mean, let's think about it. They might be able to commandeer some of those heavy-duty SWAT trucks. They'll have access to good weapons. They will have worked together where they raided houses during search warrants and stuff like that in the past. They'll have communications, etc. They'll just simply have access to all of the good stuff that any gang would absolutely love to have. Now, don't get me wrong. I have known plenty of cops that do work in the larger, more liberal cities. And the majority of those guys are good guys that would never dream of going rogue or doing anything wrong against another person. Cops have a tendency to be conservative and patriotic people that just don't like criminal wrongdoing. But I do think that there is a real possibility that any police department that has a lot of quota hires will have a risk of those type of cops forming gangs after SHTF. Now, luckily, most cops don't work for agencies like the LAPD or the New York Police Department. Fortunately, most cops both live and work in small towns across the USA, which means they're going to have a much larger investment in their community after SHTF. Your small town cop is probably married to a local school teacher or a local nurse in a hospital. Cops always seem to get married to teachers and nurses. And that small town cop was probably married by the local pastor, and probably also knows the local grocer there. And he probably also has friends and family that live in that small town also. So personally, I believe that small town cops will not generally make a practice of forming gangs after SHTF. I think that most small town cops will want to protect their community because they will be protecting their neighbors, their pastor, their wives, and their family members. Everybody knows that you don't want to fight an enemy at the end of your driveway. You want to fight your enemy before he reaches your driveway, because that helps to ensure that that enemy doesn't reach your home and your family. So small town cops will have a vested interest in his town. He'll want to keep the bad guys out of his town, and by doing that, he'll also protect his neighbors and his family. So hey, I want you to comment below. Do you live in a larger city where they have lowered the hiring standards for the police officers? Or do you live in a smaller, mid-sized town? And does the local police department where you live at, do they still have a pretty stringent hiring process? And after SHTF, would you be more concerned about criminal gangs or the cops in your area? And after SHTF, we will probably have a shortage of fuel for you to cook your food with. And sometimes smoke from a fire may draw unwanted people to your location. So to see a way that preppers can cook food without liquid fuel or having to use a fire, then click on the link that should be appearing at the top of the screen just about now to learn more about that. And to see a video where I take green and dirty lake water and I purify it into crystal clear water and I drink it to show a proven method that preppers can use to purify water after SHTF, then click on the video that should be appearing on the right side of the screen just about now. Anyways folks, if you made it this far, hey, thank you very much for watching, and I pray that you have a good night.